Welcome, one and all, to our Creatio online user group today. We're going to be talking about dynamic case management, which probably isn't what you think it is, because it wasn't what I thought it was, but it's a tool in Creatio for managing unstructured business processes. And so per the usual, your hosts today are myself, the Director of Marketing, Deneen Madura, and the lovely Megan Sheehan, our Senior Business Analyst. We do not have our co-host here today, so Megan is being a complete hero and driving this presentation herself. If you have any questions along the way, of course, please chat them to us and we will try to answer them as effectively as possible. So I'm going to hand the floor over to Megan to get us going.
All right, thanks, Deneen. So today we're going to be talking about dynamic case management and how to use that tool in Creatio. As always, we'll also talk about news and upcoming releases or recent releases. And as Deneen said, if you've got any questions, feel free to send those our way and we'll answer them when we can. If you've attended any of our recent events or any of Creatio's recent events, I'm sure you've already heard this low code messaging, but it's worth hearing again. So Creatio is really pushing this message and for a good reason. Low code development is an approach that requires little or no coding to build out applications and processes, meaning that you can build out your applications more quickly, more intuitively, and without necessarily needing a professional developer. Citizen developers are equally able to use low code development tools. And this is really important because this is a growing uh, function, a growing tool that's available. And Gartner predicts that at least 65% of application development will use low code development tools within the next 3 years. So this is something that if you haven't already started seeing or hearing, even outside of Creatio events, you're going to start hearing and seeing more about this. So this is something to kind of keep your eye out for and to keep, your finger on as a pulse. Creatio is a low code application. So Creatio has numerous system administration tools that help you modify the application and build additional functions into the application without needing to write code. And that includes tools like the section wizard, business rules, the dynamic case management function, and the business process management function. And today, obviously, we're diving into that dynamic case management piece. Um, One thing to keep in mind, or one benefit of using Creatio to build applications, is that all your applications built in Creatio share the same underlying database. You can easily share data among various applications without needing to write complex integrations between systems. So today we're going to dive into the dynamic case management functionality. This is something we've touched on a little bit in a couple of previous user groups, but never really done a deep dive on. And so I thought this would be a good topic for today. As Deneen said, the name here is perhaps not super clear in terms of what the functionality actually is. Dynamic case management is a tool for putting some degree of structure around a business process. So it has nothing to do with the cases section in Creatio, although the cases section can use it and does by default. But the dynamic case management functionality is available throughout the entire application. So dynamic case management allows you to manage stages or how you flow through a business process. It works with some sort of stage or status field so that you have a series of stages that should be completed by a user as they go through whatever that business process is. And users can choose how to progress through that stage or through that case by completing activities and by updating the stage. So it gives them some ownership or some control of that process. The other really nice thing about dynamic case management is it allows you to give structure to your process, but also to give flexibility to that structure. So your dynamic cases can have a lot of flexibility because you can allow users to have a lot of flexibility as they go through that process where they don't necessarily have to go, step A to step B to step C. Or you can put that rigid structure in place. So if you do need that more rigid approach where step A does need to lead to step B and then step C, both of those are doable through the dynamic case management process. So here on the right side, you can see a screenshot of the dynamic case management tool in action. So at the top of the next steps section here, you've got the different stages laid out on the screen, and you can see that this particular stage we're in does have a step that we're being asked to do. Dynamic case management is enabled by default in the leads, opportunities, and cases section. So you've probably seen it if you've used those sections without maybe necessarily knowing exactly what it was or what it was all about. But as I said before, dynamic case management can be set up in any section, as long as you have a stage or a status field that you've set up in that section. And that could be a custom field that you've created if there's not one there by default. So any record where you've got a series of stages that you need to progress through, dynamic case management is a tool to consider using in that section. And one other form of flexibility that's available with dynamic case management is you can have multiple cases, multiple processes within the same section. The way that would work is you would have a category field of some sort, a lookup field that will drive which case is applied, which process is applied for each particular record as it gets started. So, we'll actually use this today in my example. We'll create a couple of different opportunity processes for different categories of opportunities. So when you're setting up a dynamic case, first you're going to start by setting up your stages. What are the different stages that you're going to progress through in this particular stage? It does not assume, although you certainly frequently would happen, that you want to use every stage that's available in your stage lookup as a stage in your dynamic case. And again, that goes back to potentially having multiple processes, multiple cases in the same section. You might have some stages that are used only in one type of case and not in the other. So first you would set up all of the stages that you're going to have in your case. And as you set up each stage, you can then set up, first of all, the flow from one stage to the next. So this is one of those areas where you can provide a little structure or a lot of structure, where you can lock down whether or not users can skip stages as they move through the process. So again, if you want a pretty flexible process, you don't have to use that function. But if you do want a more lockstep approach where a user can only go from step 1 to step 2 to step 3, you can lock it down so that the stages will only let them go to that next step. Then within any stage, you can set up some steps that need to be completed in that stage. And those can be mandatory required steps that the user has to complete in order to move on to the next stage, or they can be optional suggestions to the user, just sort of prompts of things to think about or to resources to use at that particular stage in the process. There's a variety of different steps that you can create. So you can do tasks, basically any sort of activity that you want to create. You can send a record for approval. You can change the access rights for a record if you need to give fewer or more people access to, say, edit the record at a particular stage. You can open up a page so that the user can actually just be prompted to fill in some additional details. You can send an email, or in terms of flexibility, the last one's really the most flexible option here. You can call a process. And so if there's anything else that you want to do at any point in the process, that's not one of those first 5 options, you can build a process in the business process library and call that process from your dynamic case. So basically, there's really no limit to what you can do. It's just that they've sort of made it easier and given you some extra options around these first 5 options because those are the most frequently used steps within a particular case. Besides defining the steps, you'll also get to set whether or not to automatically change the stage when the steps within a stage are completed. So if I've got 3 tasks within a particular stage and I finish those 3 tasks, do I automatically change the stage, or does the system automatically change the stage to the next stage in the process, or do we stay in the stage that we're in until I, as the user, choose to make that change? And then you can do some grouping and color coding, so you can kind of change the visual appearance of the stages. And you can also restrict stages to certain users or roles if there are stages, again, where maybe you only want certain users to have access rights to do certain things. So we're going to go ahead and pull up Creatio, and I'm going to set up a couple of cases in the opportunities section. So we're going to work with the dynamic cases. Oh, it looks like my login timed out, of course. Figures. We'll work with the opportunities section. We'll make some modifications to the default cases that are enabled there. And I just need to really quickly check my memory on what the field that I want to use is called. So I am going to set up a couple of different cases so you can see how that works if you have multiple cases within a section. I'm going to use this category field to drive that. So we'll have a different case, a different process for our enterprise opportunities versus our small and medium business opportunities. All right, so we're going to go into our case manager. Same way we get to Section Wizard. In fact, it's just another tab within the Section Wizard, but using the direct link to set up system cases, set up section cases will take us directly into the Cases tab in Section Wizard instead of the Section tab. So here we've got some of the basic settings for building our cases. First of all, which column has our stage or status field with the different options for the stages that we're going to progress through. And then second of all, if we are going to have multiple cases within the same section, which field, which column tells Creatio which case to apply in which scenario. So this is where I want to pick that category column. It is going to pop up and warn me that I do have an existing case. I'll have to go in and edit that and set up which categories to apply it to. So it's going to deactivate it for now because right now it needs to be updated before it can be used. So I'll go ahead and open that case up. And here we can see that the stages are already all set up here within our process. If we wanted to remove or add a stage, we could go ahead and do that. So I can show you how that works. I'll just remove the proposal stage and then I'll add it back in. It will then give me a place to pick which stage out of my stages in my stage lookup I want to have next in my process. And you can see there are actually more values in that lookup that I'm choosing to use in this particular stage. In this particular case, I should say. This case by default does not have any steps set up within any stage. So we're going to go ahead and add some steps. I will point out to you that if you are going to modify the default cases, at least in the leads and opportunity section, I haven't done as much with the cases section, but probably true there as well. A lot of the default logic for these cases is actually implemented in business processes, not in the case itself. The case itself really just defines the stages. So if you are going to modify those processes, you will most likely have to make some changes to in the process library as well as in the case setup. So let's say I want to go ahead and add some steps here. Let's say I'm going to put some steps into the contracting stage. So I want to make sure that my sales team is reminded that there's a couple different contracts they have to get signed off on and as they do this contracting stage. So let's say we need to get a CSA signed and we need to get a signed order. And I should probably be consistent here. So let's call this signed CSA. All right. So as you can see, I easily created those steps and now I can go into each of those steps and set some additional details. So it's going to default to creating tasks. If I want to create some other sort of action, I would use the drop down menu there to see those same options we talked about a few minutes ago in the slides. And so for each of the steps, I can define the details, how do I want to categorize that task? How do I want to schedule it? Do I want to pop it up automatically? Who's going to be assigned that particular task? Do I want to remind them? And this one's pretty important, so I'm going to spend a minute here. This is going to control when this particular task gets created and shown to the user in the process. So I can either create both of these tasks at the same time when I start the stage, or I can create each task sequentially as the previous step is completed. Again, that's going back to that flexibility of whether you want to give the user the flexibility to complete steps in different order, or whether you want them to move lockstep through a process where they have to do step A and then step B and then step C. So depending on, what makes sense for your particular process and this particular stage of the process even, I can make the appropriate determination there. We can also, again, set whether or not this step is optional or required. So if it's a required step, the user will be forced to complete this particular task before they move on to the next stage in the process. So it will, if they try to move ahead, it will pop up an error message saying you haven't completed all of the required steps, and they'll have to complete this task first. And then if we wanted to do that auto advancing of the stages, we could go ahead and set that up. There are going to be some options here basically to go to different stages based on the results. So we'll use that a little bit in one of the later tasks that we'll set up. For now, let's go ahead and save this. Up, and it's yelling at me because I got distracted. I dove right in. I forgot to go back and fill in the field that tells Creatio when to use this particular case. So this goes back to my changing of this setting to say that we're going to have different cases based off a category. So I need to tell Creatio which category or categories to use this case with. So this is going to be our small and medium business case, and we'll go ahead and save. So now we can go back. We have our case here. I was double checking. I was pretty sure. I'm not on the latest release yet. The latest release just added the option to copy a case so we could start from this one to build our second one, but I'm not on that release yet. So we'll have to start a new one from scratch. So we'll go ahead and create a new case here. This will give us a second case. Don't block my pop-ups. And we can start building our enterprise case. So we'll call this enterprise, and we'll use this one when our category is enterprise. Again, we'll start by just setting up our stages. So we'll have our qualification stage, and then our presentation stage, our proposal stage, our contracting stage, and our closed won and closed lost. So as I'd mentioned, you can set up the flow from one stage to the next. It automatically defaults to allowing me to go to any stage from any stage. But if I don't want to allow that, maybe I only want the user to be able to go from qualification to presentation or to directly closing out the deal as lost. I can go ahead and remove those as the next possible stages, and I could go through each of my stages and put that control in. I can also group stages together. So a lot of times you'll see this done with something like won and lost. These are both ending stages. It doesn't really make sense to show closed won flowing to closed lost. And so what I can do is group those two stages together so that they show kind of one below the other in the flow diagram. And so I can go ahead and group this together with closed won. They do have a setting for whether or not this is considered a successful stage. Closed lost obviously is not successful. And a lot of times people will also apply different colors to different stages just to kind of help clarify that. So I can make closed lost red, and maybe I want to make closed lost something different too, but not red, like maybe a darker green or something like that, just to kind of give it some standout color as I'm looking at the screen as a user. And again, we can then go ahead and add our steps into our process. So let's go ahead and create a couple of tasks here. We need to do an NDA. We need to do a discovery call. Want to request their evaluation criteria. And then I do want to show you something other than a task. So I'm going to do an approval step here. And so again, the tasks have the same settings we saw on the previous case. So we can go ahead and set the length, the timing, Let's go ahead and make this required. And then the approval defaults to required. We obviously need to get the approval. So we're going to go ahead and approve. I did not set this up appropriately. Sorry, my mistake. I have to turn on approvals for this section. So let's save what we have here. And it's going to take a minute or two of saving. So if you have any questions that you've been thinking about asking, but you haven't asked yet, feel free to take a minute to type those up into the chat now, because we're going to have to go through a couple of different saves here. I apologize for that. I didn't fully walk through setting this up clearly. So I just need to turn on this approval setting here to say that we do want to enable approvals in the opportunities section. That one gets me every time. I always forget there's a setting for that. And then I get to the point where I want to send something for an approval and I go through exactly this process of saying, oh shoot, I forgot that setting yet again. And I need to go turn it on. This was saved. We're going to close it so we can reload it. All right. Go back to our cases. Open up our enterprise case again. And this time we should be able to fully set up our approval stage. All right, there we go. So it defaulted in for us that we're approving this opportunity, passing in obviously the record that the case is for, and we'll set who's going to approve it. So is the same person going to approve it whose record it is? Is it their manager who's going to approve it? Is it some specific role? We'll go ahead and say the manager of the current user. We can allow the approver to delegate to another user. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and just say it's going to be this user themselves, because otherwise when we test it, we won't be able to see the approval process. But obviously, normally it's probably not the person who's approving it, although you could also just designate another user through the user setting. Do we want to do any sort of email notifications? We'll skip that just for the sake of simplicity. We'll do this after all the previous steps are completed. And then we'll automatically change the stage from here. So if the result is positive, meaning the person approves it, we'll automatically set the stage to presentation. And if it's negative, we'll go ahead and close out the opportunity as lost because we've decided not to move forward with this particular opportunity. All right, just in the interest of having a few more steps to show you as examples here, I'm going to create a couple of these. All right, so let's make one of these required. Let's also sequence these so you can see that happening. This guy. Oh, you. Yep. Okay. All right, in the interest of simplicity and time, we'll go ahead and just not worry about building out the rest of this case. So let's save this. And let's go take a look at our cases in action. All right, close, save, close, and refresh. All right, I mostly want to walk through that enterprise process since we put a little bit more time on that one. So let's just set up a new opportunity. Oh, I don't have a technology advisors in here. Okay, that's fine. We'll use whoever. And so I'm going to go ahead and set this as the enterprise, and it should go ahead and start my case for me automatically once I save that. So I'll give that a moment to load. You can see now I've got my different stages here. Why did it not complete or create my first step for me? Well, that's interesting. The joy of live demos, everybody.
I think you're doing great, Megan.
All right, what did I miss? That's there. They're both active. Okay, this one actually isn't active, so let's activate that one. Let's do one more thing. Let's just put the category field on that mini pop-up page just so that we're creating that, filling that in on creation, just in case that matters. It shouldn't, I don't think, but just to be safe, we're gonna add that in here. Add mode, perfect, okay. Okay. Refresh again. Oh, good. Phew. Okay. So here we've got our step set up. You can see that, first of all, we've restricted what the next steps were. So it's going to show me with that, red crossed out symbol that I cannot go from the qualification stage to the proposal or contracting stage. I can go to the presentation stage, but this is a required step. So if I do, it's going to say, actually, try again, Megan. You didn't do all the required steps, so you can't do that yet. So let's go ahead and complete our steps here. These are just standard activities, although obviously you could have different activity categories that you're using so that you have different results, for example, for different tasks that you're doing along the way. We'll go ahead and complete all of these steps so that we go to our approval step. Okay, now it automatically proceeded to that next step because I had put that sequence in there. So approval is required. Again, this is a required step, so it's not going to let me advance. And then because I set myself as the approver, I do have the approve or reject buttons right here. Normally, obviously, again, the user is not going to be approving their own records. Typically, it would go to whoever was set as the approver. It would give them a notification that they've got a new opportunity to review. They can click through to see it. They can even approve or reject it right from here if for some reason this was enough information for them to know that they want to approve it. And then once it's approved, we'll go ahead and automatically go to the next step. So we said if it was approved, it automatically go to the presentation stage. In this stage, as you might remember, I sequence each of the steps, or actually I made the next two steps both sequence off of this one. So when I complete the handoff to sales engineering, it will automatically create the next couple of steps. And again, I did put a required stage in, so it's not going to let me advance until I do that step. Let's go ahead and say we do that step. This step is not required, so it will let me advance without it. And we also did not put restrictions on what stage was next for this particular stage, so it will let me also jump several stages ahead in the process since I didn't restrict that. All right, I think that hopefully gives you a pretty good understanding of the capabilities of the dynamic case management functionality. So again, what this is doing is allowing you to flexibly structure your business processes. You can use it to guide users on the next step that they should be taking as they complete a business process. You have the ability to have multiple cases for different record types so that you can have multiple processes within the same section, and to define the stages, the steps, and how the user can move through the case process as they're doing that process flow. So that's going to wrap up the presentation on dynamic case management. I do have a couple of other things to share with you. But again, if you've got any questions, feel free to share those. First of all, Creatio announced some pretty big news yesterday. So Creatio just announced that they've received 68 million in funding. That's a minority investment from a couple of different investment firms. So one US based and one Europe based. They're using those funds to invest in R&D, marketing and sales expansion, and partner growth and support. The leadership team, the strategy, the product vision are not changing. So this is just giving them some additional capital to help them grow. This is the first time Creatio has done any investment in this way. Their first round of funding, they've been completely organic up until this point. And Creatio announced last week a new release, the 7.17.2 release. So I pulled out a couple of highlights from the release notes. I've got the link to the full release notes there at the bottom of the slide. There were some improvements in marketing in terms of how you add an audience to an event, as well as how you can use an event or a landing page to trigger into a campaign as a starting point for a campaign audience. On the sales side, the big change here was in forecast. So this kind of continues a trend we've been seeing with lots of development going into the forecast section over the last, say, 12 to 18 months. The latest changes there are adding drill down into forecasts so you can see the records that are included in the forecast calculation. Some pieces of that are going to be in beta testing this release. So if you're using forecasting and interested in that beta test, you can reach out to Creatio support to be included in that. In the cases, I'm sorry, in the service area, the main change is adding a new learning model so that there's AI for the cases section. The out-of-the-box machine learning model is going to show similar cases to the user when they're working on a case, so they can easily see previous cases that maybe are similar and might match components of this case, so they can quickly reuse the resolution steps from a previous case. Other kind of application-wide changes, there were numerous improvements to the new chat functionality that Creatio added in the 7.17 release. Chat is also moving out of beta at this point, I believe. So if you have not already seen or looked at the chat functionality, it might be time to take a look at that and see if that's something you're interested in using. They've also added the ability to work with printable reports or files through business processes. Some pieces of that functionality were previously available through a free marketplace add-on, but they've just gone ahead and added that functionality directly into the core product. So you can generate files and either save them to the record and or email them through a business process. On the system administration side or low code development side, they've made it easier to create custom details. So you previously had to do a new detail. You had to do the setup in like 4 stages in 4 different areas. They've moved it all into the detail wizard at this point. So it's as easy to set up a custom detail as it has been to set up a custom section for quite a while, which is great. They've also added some alerts to system administrators if you have any licenses that are about to expire and haven't had your new licenses, purchased and uploaded into your system, so that you're aware of that and can do something about it before the expiration date. And again, there's much more included as always, so always check out the full release notes to keep up with everything that's changing.
And I'll include all those links that Megan just shared in the follow-up email, which will be sent to you by tomorrow with this recording as well. One thing I want to mention just in closing, we have a webinar coming up tomorrow on the Starfish ETL side for HubSpot and Infor Essentials. And you might be asking, Janine, why the heck are you telling us about a HubSpot Infor webinar? How is that relevant? Hear me out, it is, and I'll explain why. So what these essentials packages are for Starfish are these integrations that connect the standard fields of your systems right out of the box so that you can integrate faster and do that with less risk and less back and forth. And so tomorrow they're highlighting that connection between HubSpot and Infor. But what's important to know is that they also have essentials packages for Creatio. There's currently an integration of this nature for Creatio and HubSpot. There's an integration for this for Creatio and Xero, which is an accounting software, I believe. Creatio and MyOb, which is an accounting software, is coming soon, as well as Creatio and QuickBooks. So if you are looking, you know you're going to be doing integration or you're interested in integration, it would be informative to go to this because even though they're talking about HubSpot and Infor, the premise of it applies to Creatio in many ways as well. So if you get the gist of what's happening and what's possible with the HubSpot Infor integration through Starfish, it's going to be the same approach for a Creatio integration. So encourage you to attend that. I'll include that link in there too if you just want to learn more about it and check it out. I want to thank Megan for being an all-star today and doing this presentation for us. And again, if there's any questions just in wrap up that anybody has, don't be shy, toss them out. If you think of anything later, as always, you can respond to the follow-up email that I send you and I will route your query where appropriate. So we'll give you back some time in your day. Thank you all for joining us, and I hope that you have a great rest of your week.